Hello YouTube people, today I'm here to show you my latest version of Blue Black Frog and let's jump into the deck list. So we are playing 18 lands currently. I'm just playing 2 Dark Silk Shores because I just felt this land has some upside in the early game, but sometimes you really want to have your 4th land untapped and not being able to achieve that point is bad. So I'm just playing 2 for now. I think maybe 2 or 3 is the correct number. I'm still playing 2 sewers because I think this is probably the best land in the deck. A lot of the times you pass with a fetch up on turn 1, so being able to fetch the survey land is great. And for the rest, is quite stock. Also, we play 18 lands with double sink into stupor. I like to count those as half of a land because a lot of the time the spell is active, but this deck is quite mana hungry, so you might even land it. I think Sink into Super completely replaced Dota nowadays, and I'm happy to have 2 in my deck. I think this card is great. I'm playing 7 cantrips currently. This is as Utah did. I think I'm having quite success with this configuration. Plus I'm playing a Cling to Dust. Cling to Dust is here to fight graveyard decks, but also is a very good grindy tool in the mirror and versus control decks. And it's also here to remove a Flage. And also sometimes it's good to gain free life, maybe versus Boros. Then we have 1 Pierce, free Snare. I think Snare is quite great in this moment of the meta. And I'm not sure about the Pierce, but for now it's here as like the 4th force of negation, you know, the 4th wheel of the shopping thing. And then as removal I'm playing 4 push, 1 long goodbye, and 1 toxic deluge. Okay, so for the removal I'm playing 4 push, 1 toxic deluge and 1 long goodbye. I don't play any drown in the lock, I just have this as removal. I don't know if this is the best removal yet, but I wanted something to fight Planeswalkers, and since nowadays Planeswalker only cost basically free, because you just want to kill Teferi, you want to kill Narset, you want to kill Tamiyo sometimes, and run and 6, I think this is fine. And also for the creature, it served a good purpose. Of course it's bad versus Eldrazi, but that's a matter we deal with the sideboard. And I'm playing 1 Toxic Deluge in the main. This is mostly because I think Boros is gonna be one of the best deck in the format. And it's also very good versus Nadu. So I just like to have access to this card from the main deck, because of course you play a lot of cantrips, so seeing cards is great. And I think since we play Psychic Frog, we can afford to have maybe some one-offs that aren't great in every matchup, because eventually we can discard. This is the same matter as when we played Blood Moon with Ledger Shredder in Murktide, so eventually we can just ditch it. But I'm not sure about the Deluge in general. I think it's very good in this moment of the meta specifically. Then I'm playing 2 Archmage's Charm. This is a card I want in multiples. I think maybe 3 is the correct number. I'm really thinking about cutting the Pierce for the 3rd charm. I played with 4 charms, and I mean, I just love the card. I think sometimes with this deck you really need to transition between the mid game to the late game, where you then play Murktide with counterspell and force up. So this card is just great at holding up interaction and just drawing you cards. On additional side, you can target them if you have maybe like 2 Bowmasters to deal a lot of damage. So this is similar to Deep Analysis, but in a better way. I like Deep Analysis, to be honest. I'm not a hater, but I think Charm is maybe a step ahead than Deep Analysis, at least in my testing. Then I'm playing, of course, for Bowmaster, for Psychic Fraud, for Murktide, and I think those numbers are quite stock. I never want to to have lesser copies than of these cards, especially in the main deck. And I'm also playing one ability. I don't think this card is great. I think my friend Max covered this topic well in an article you can find on Patreon. But I still like to have one. I think this is very good versus Nadu, especially for the play patterns where maybe you play a Psychic Frog, you ability the Nadu, and then you have counter spells up the next turn. And also we are playing Charms, so sometimes ability and then you have Charm up. So I still think one is fine. I wouldn't play more than one in the main. We're playing free forces though, so we have this free interaction. I think that with Murktide, with the blue-red Murktide especially, your creatures are much more expendables, while here you tend to play the Protect the Queen game a lot of the time. So for those who doesn't know what it Protect the Queen is just basically you play a threat and then you protect it until you win the game with it. With Murktide it usually takes 2 turns, with Frog maybe a couple more, but Psychic Frog really recoups the card you discarded with forces, so it's not a big problem. Moving to the sideboard, I really hate the Eldrazi and the Tron decks. As you can see, we have free Break the Ice, free Consume to Memory. I found Tron to be very popular, especially on Magic Online, so I want to be prepared for the matchup. I used to cut the scars in the past, but I think you really need, especially Consume to Memory is essential to beat all the Tron variants. Will Break the Ice, maybe this card is not great versus all the variants because we know that some of the Tron lists nowadays play Utopia Sprawl plus Forest, etc. But for now I'm quite satisfied with those. Of course, like if in your meta or you expect Amulet Titan, you can play something different, wait on lands, you can play like Dumping Sphere instead of Break the Ice. You can play one more Sablet in the sideboard, but I don't expect Amulet to be a gamer nowadays, at least until the Manadu, so that's my sideboard. So we have this ability for the same purposes, and also this is fine versus just Sky Control, so I like to have another one. He's not the best versus just Sky, but again it's a flash threat, so a lot of the times it's just free for 4 mana with flash that you play, and that's it, you start to attack. Then we have those cards for the graveyard matchup. I consider every deck with Flage a graveyard matchup, so I tend to side Surgical versus just Sky Control, and versus in general control deck with Flage, while I tend to side Hearth versus aggro deck with Flage. Like versus Boros, I'm much more inclined to side Hearth, because I feel this card is just better, and at some point it can become either a blocker or an attacker. Also, I think Hearth is a very big gamer in Mirror. I start to face some mirrors. I think this deck is starting to become much more popular than it used to be. So Hearth is great for that purpose. Though I still feel like Surgical is really effective versus Goryo, especially because you can play strategically, while Hearth sometimes you get hit by a Goryo response, a prismatic ending, a force of negation. So it's a bit more difficult card to achieve a purpose versus Goryo. I'm still playing one Narset. This is a card that I love to play. Actually, might not be correct to play this card, but I really appreciate what this card does versus Mono Black. I don't think we have much more sideboard slots versus Mono Black. So I still like to have a Silver Bullet, and this is even fine versus all the blue decks, versus ring decks. It's always a card I like to play. It's also fine versus Goryo because you deny the card draw, and you can find Surgical to replace immediately the free mana. And also, when you play free Force of Negation, I think Narset is quite okay to play. I used to play multiple copies of this card, but for now I'm down to one, and it's been fine as one copy. Then I'm playing the second copy of Toxic Deluge. I think Toxic Deluge as I said, is a big gamer nowadays. Um, I still like to have a second copy in the sideboard. I'm still thinking if there is something better we can play versus energy. I started to think about engineered explosives, but a lot of their mana cost is 0, 1, 2, sometimes 3, so explosive is not the best. So I think Deluge is just a necessary evil. I know that sometimes you have to lose a lot of life, but that's it. Like sometimes you clear the board and then you win. It happens a lot that you have Psychic Frog, you grow it more than the amount of life you pay with Toxic Deluge, and then you start bashing. So I just appreciate this play pattern. Then I have to Dispute. Dispute is especially for Nadu. I like to counter Nadu for 1 mana, also for Teferi for the same matchup, but it's also fine again in Mirror versus Jeskai Control. I still dedicate a lot of slots to beat Nadu, just because I think, especially in paper, in the following RCQ season that is starting, it will be a gamer. But of course, like if you don't expect Nadu at all, like in Magic Online leagues, especially there aren't many Nadu, you can trim some slots to play a more aggressive sideboard versus energy and Tron. And as the last card, I'm playing Stern Scolding. This is a bit of catch-all versus many decks. It's good versus Goryo, it's good versus Energy, it's fine versus Nadu. I wouldn't say it's good, but you side it in. And it's good in Mirror. Like, it's a good card in general. I'm not sure about how effective this is over the Dispute. I can see playing like 2 Scolding, 1 Dispute. But for now, I'm playing just 1. And that is it for the deck tech. Now we will jump into some matches. Hello YouTube people, today I'm here to talk a bit more about why you should play Blue-Black Frog, and also the difference between this deck and the other tempo decks. I already showed you my deck list, my choices, but I wanted to talk a bit more philosophically about the deck. So I'm really interested in this deck because I think it's very difficult to play, and it's very skill rewarding. Being skill rewarding for a deck in Modern is not something it's very common, because a lot of decks that have a strange learning curve. Like for example, right now in Modern there are a lot of combo decks that are maybe tough to play in the beginning, but once you know the combo or all the possible play patterns, like for example Amulet, once you know everything regarding your lands and your sequence, then it's much more easy to play. While this deck, I think, is a bit difficult. I think you really need to know Magic very well, and even if you don't know that, it's a very good way to learn, because a lot of mistakes, a lot of spots rewards your critical thinking and knowing of the matchup, knowing of the format, knowing of Magic. So I think this is a very good deck to learn how to play Magic well and how to play even the format. Um, I think this is kind of true for all the Murktide decks, just because you don't play very strong cards such as Primeval Titan, Nadu, Indomitable Creativity, or like Emrakul, but all your cards puts you a bit ahead, so you just try to play with a synergy of cards, and also you play on both turns of the games, especially play a lot in your opponent turn. So understanding how to spend the mana correctly, when to play a land and when to hold a land is crucial for this deck. Another thing I can suggest you regarding this deck is it's surprisingly well positioned in the format. We just played a league. I'm currently 4-0 and we beat Boros, we beat Tron. I tend to beat Nadu a lot when I play this deck on stream. Also, you can check my streams on Twitch. I stream every night. And I think this deck is really well positioned in the modern format right now. I don't know what will happen after August 26, but I will just pick up this deck to grind the first RCQs from next week on. Another question that people tend to ask me a lot is why this deck over the other blue shells. I think the reason is that Psychic Frog is a very strong card. As you may see in the following videos on this playlist, Psychic Frog is the maker of the deck. It tends to be a very strong turn to play. It's also a late game play. You can play it with counterspell up, you can protect it with force, and it can just be a card that wins you the game on turn 3, on turn 4. You can just discard your low end and start attacking, or slowly grinding your opponent by drawing a card each turn for multiple turns. I also think that Fatal Push is a good card in this current modern because it answers basically all the threats you can face. And I also think that playing a bit more on your opponent's end step is a good advantage, and this is maybe one of the best decks that do so. I still think the Blue-Red Wizard deck is very valid, but this deck is a bit more different. I think the Blue-Red Wizard deck is more of a control deck, because you tend to win with Flame of Honors and Snapcasters, and eventually you play a Murktide with 3 or 4 counterspells up, or there are even versions that doesn't play Murktide at all, they just play Sablety, so it's really a tempo deck that tries to go on the control side, while this deck is really reminds me on the first iterations of Murktide. So we play for Murktide, we play for Psychic Frog, we try to control the game until we slam a threat and win with that. There is, you will see in the videos, there is always a point where our plan start to fall down, so we will really need to understand what's the best turn to play a threat and start to attack. A lot of people started to ask me also regarding Tamillo. I don't think Tamillo is a good card in this deck. I like Tamillo as a card. I think it's good in tempo and blue decks in general. I think it's like very strong in Blue-Red Wizards. I don't just like in this deck because I think that you tend to keep one landers a lot with this deck, though I like the mana configuration. And your first turn is usually you tend to play either Consider, Preordain, hold up interaction in form of Spell Snare or Push, and eventually you can search for the Undercity Sewer to scry, to surveil. So I think your turn 1 is you want to do that, and on turn 2 you either hold up Counterspell or play Psychic Frog. That's the 2 things you want to do. So the play patterns of Tamio really rewards you when you have not busy turn 1, when you can just play that on turn 1, and then from turn 2 on you hold up mana for counter spells. But since this deck really suffers a lot of cards, you really need to control the early game. So having countering a spell on turn 2 is really important. While with Blue-Red Wizards, you can let resolve some threats and eventually Pyroclasm or Flame of Honor or remove other stuff, because you have even more removals. We just play for push. You can count the Bowmaster as a removal, but I'm not counting those as removals. And also we have Long Goodbye and Toxic Deluge, that's fine, but like the big removals are push. So like your counter spell matters much more here than in Wizards. I think that's all, but if you have any question, the comments are open. I will try to answer to any question. Yeah, I think another card people tend to mention is the Merfolk, the 2 mana, the 3 mana Merfolk that turns all the lands into islands. I started to play with that card, but I think it was a bit low impact for what I want to do. I think the card is good if you play that in multiples. I think it's much more of a good main deck card than a sideboard card. And I think my configuration to beat big mana is great at the moment. I have free Break the Ice and free Consign to Memory. That's much for Tron. For Amulet, I don't have much. Actually, I have Sablety and Narset. So if you expect Amulet to be popular, you can switch to Break the Ice for the Merfolk. But I think Tron is much more popular right now, and Break the Ice is kind of fundamental because the Merfolk is not great versus Tron. That's something we just have to state. Like sometimes you play the Merfolk and they just have Mindstone and they can start playing the Eldrazi, or they have Karn, they have the One Ring, so and also it costs free. So I think you really need to destroy the lands. Like even when I play red, I prefer to play Charmos in the sideboard right now alongside the Blood Moon, because I think you really need to outpace their Eldrazi, otherwise they can produce too much mana, especially now that everyone is playing for Eldrazi Temple and for Ujin's Labyrinth. How is the matchup versus Nadu? That's another good topic. I think the matchup is good. Of course, Nadu is the best deck in the format. It's probably the tier S of Modern at the moment. So saying that the matchup is good doesn't mean that you will win all the matches. I think with some playtest, understanding how you should play how you should play the match, what cards are impactful and what are not impactful, you can have a good win rate. Though of course Nadu is just very strong. Sometimes they play turn 1 Halfling, you don't have the push, then they play turn 2 Nadu, and go from there. They also play Urza Saga. So if you want to beat Nadu, of course you can tune this deck to beat consistently Nadu. You should probably play maybe one more Sablety, one more Dress Down in the sideboard, stuff like that. Also Toxic Deluge is very strong. But I think right now I have a good a good win rate versus Nadu. And I'm fine with the deck as it is right now. Yeah, I don't think there are any more questions that comes to my mind, but if you have more, again, just the comments are open, so make sure to drop a comment. And if you like this playlist, these type of videos, drop a like, follow the channel. And another thing I want to mention is, of course, I run a Patreon. You can see it right here. So if you're interested in guides, especially a sideboard guide and a deck guide regarding this deck, where I explain all the choices, all the deck building choices, etc., more in details, you can just subscribe. And there are 154 posts currently. There are deck guides for any blue tempo deck. I just posted a very long article regarding the meta. My friend Twinless Twin just posted an article regarding all the card choices. So, and also we have a very sweet community on Discord, and we try to discuss a lot on all the decks. And I think this is the best way either to support me, to level up your tempo game, and in general to contribute yourself to the archetype, because a lot of ideas that comes from the Discord also influence me and Max to produce better content and to reflect on the meta. For example, like this Cling to Dust was suggested by Discord users, and I found it quite efficient, and now it's kinda of a stock card. So I really appreciate the Discord action. Okay, yeah, now you will see this league. I really spoiled the result, but you can check how I played and all the decisions we made and all the matchup we faced. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Have a nice day.